panelists. Are there any comments that you'd like to make? Questions, issues?
Well, actually, I have a comment. Yeah, I wish I can be a student of all of you. Your presentations were excellent. Thank you very much. And well, actually, YJ Park's question about how long it's going to take to have a consensus, and being a kind of ICANN initial board, I know it's going to take forever. But on the other hand, then the system is working. So it's already there. The cloud computing and the international cloud services and the global services, that's already there. And big data analysis is already there. So in that sense, how can we process the order, right? So we want to create a consensus after the system is running, or before the system is running. Probably that's the point about the kind of government-based governance versus a multi-stakeholder governance. So one of the comments, and basically, if I could be a student of yours, then I'm going to raise a question to you. But how the technology could be, deployed when the social consensus is not there, right? So you mentioned about the security. Digital security can be copied anyway. Therefore, no security. But there could be a way to provide the security, but it's a technology to run the emails, and then when we depend on that email, and then we're really concerned about security. So, so the question is, okay, do we have to work on the concern first, or we want to develop the technology, and then we're going to set up the rules and the regulation. So that kind of what comes first is going to be a very important issue for the cyberspace.
Well, thank you for your response, for still very positive kind of way of thinking. But I think when we start to talk about the domain names and all those ICANN, I'm afraid there was a systems already there as well. I mean, the domain registration business have been running already for many years, even before ICANN was set up. But why we could, why we kind of ran into all of those complicated issues was because a lot of those interests, the vested interests were presented, like the perspective from the legal community and the trademark community, especially, and those who have this vested interest, they are not quite willing to compromise as long as they secure their own interest. So that's the sort of the main reason it will take a lot of kind of the process at the time and energy for us to reach consensus. But I mean, I really wish we could have much easier process for cloud data in the future.
Thank you very much for the questions. In my opinion, if we make a good terminology in our legal provision, maybe the cloud computing, whatever in the future the name of the computing, is almost the same in the elements and the components. So let's take a look for the cloud computing. The focus only, someone delivered to you, and they will share with a set of internet connected devices, procedures, services, and anything. So it means if we can optimizing the existing legal framework about something, let's say about the personal data protection, I believe some part of the aspect before the list had already predicted. I don't want to make the technology become items to the public. So that's why pay attention from the consumer perspective. There is no global consensus for the consumer interest. But indeed, who pay all of these risks? Consumers. Is there any enough clear information for them to make a decision to join with the system or not yet? To what extent, maybe from the previous decade, the business need to protect in order to grow up the business. But now, in the next decade, the problem is to what extent you can responsible about something that consumers do not know. It's like a trend of the business of trust. Let's make a little out of the box from Microsoft. In this laptop, is this Microsoft? Let's take a look. If I drink a water and you put the water in here, there is something add in here. So I possess and I receive and I use this and I take the value. But what happened in this digital industry? I give a trust to product as my expectations. I give the trust in my space, in my memory. There is no add for the space. If I buy this laptop with the 300 gigabyte in the storage, there's nothing more. So I give my space trust on you. But I don't know anything about the code. So I cannot prove there is a mistake behind that. So who bears the risk? Is that a good government to deliver the e-system to the public without awareness, without the guarantee of the security, without the customer's education? So it was undisputed that cloud computing is the evolution of computing. It offers the easy, of course. We can boost this with responsibility and liabilities. That's all.
Thank you very much, Professor. Professor Hong?
Cloud governance is the branch of internet governance, and like the general discussion on internet governance, it cannot be done through one single platform, through one single process, or in one single policy. There are multiple platforms, venues, forums for these discussion. And whether I can model stakeholder governance is working, and whether this direction to presume, I can board member here, we must trust his expertise. But there's a very interesting dynamics among all the stakeholder groups at ICANN. So for the cloud computing, this new beginning, probably we can think about more and ones that impacted more.
Let me have a comment on that as well. Looking at it from the perspective of data protection or privacy, I tend to agree with Professor Edmund that some aspects of data protection law can be applied to protect personal data. Of course, depending upon is it private cloud, is it public cloud, is it in the cloud of that country or overseas. And if it involves the cloud in that country, then the whole provision or majority of provisions on data protection of that country are applicable. But of course, if it involves a cloud somewhere else, not within the country, then the issue of cross-border is important. And there are provisions in the data protection laws of countries around the world about these how to protect data if it's transferred out of that country. So the basic premise is that yes, you can transfer data for the purpose of cloud computing, but you have to make sure the protection is there. So to sum up my point, yes, to some extent, with regards to protection of personal data, the data protection laws around the world can be applied at some extent.
Thank you, Professor. These are very big issues indeed. Now, I'd like, if I can, to open it up for questions, comments, points from the audience. And if you would, please identify yourself at the beginning.
Thank you for excellent panel. I'm Tomo Aki Watanabe from Global, a part of International University of Japan, working on IT policies and information society issues. My question, in a way, is a direct answer to Professor Clark's provocative question. What do you think about the prospect of this possibility of somewhat naive view maybe that like we have on personal data or privacy issues regarding trans-border move of data, maybe there comes a day within 5 years that we agree that if this and this and that conditions are met regarding law enforcement and civil liberty, then we all agree that within those range of countries, trans-border data flow is permissible, acceptable, and there should be no barrier to this data trade. That's the kind of future agreement that I think can come quite soon, but maybe you have different views.
Yeah, well, the main reason I presented a bit of more, pessimistic kind of perspective was because my observation with this the quiz data negotiation between the European Union and United States. Basically, even like the countries from Asia are not quite actively participate in that kind of dialogue yet. It's been just like the two main players. But still, as I said, it's been just an ongoing process, and it's been already like 14 years of negotiation, and no decision yet. So the people in that IT community felt very exhausted about this whole process because I remember when I was participating in one of those quiz task force in the early 2000s. And when I go back to last year's kind of the quiz process, it's at the sort of similar stage. And just the people are not willing to agree with each other. And maybe as you said, if the kind of people present like certain conditions and some kind of the trade between them, maybe they might be willing to agree with each other. But again, I have to highlight the fact that the negotiation parties are quite limited to the U.S. and the European Union. And still we have this much painful process. So what if we have all those global participants in the same kind of, the negotiation process, then it will be much more painful process in the future. So that's the kind of reason I predicted maybe in 20 years of this negotiation might be to kind of only, if we also look at how climate change negotiation is processed right now.
If I may add to Shannon, it's not the future that it is happening now. Cross-border data flow is common. And looking at it from legal perspective, again, if you look at the laws around the world, especially on data protection, and now I think 92 countries that have adopted comprehensive legislation on data protection. And when you look at the provisions of the law, they don't prohibit transfer of data. In fact, the OECD was drafted, was developed very much trying to allow data to be transferred across borders. And I don't see it is a problem, basically. You are right. If you satisfy the requirements of the domestic legislation, go ahead. You can transfer the data. I'll give you an example. The recently enacted law of Singapore. There's a very brief provision on this cross-border data transfer. Yes, you can transfer data, provided you can ensure that the data will be protected. Same thing in Malaysia. Same thing, the law in other parts of the world. So cross-border data transfer is happening, and the law does not prohibit the transfer as long as you can provide some adequate protection.
Would any of the other panelists like to say anything?
I think from the civil perspective, it's much easier rather than talking about the global consensus. Just make it clear in your business that to what extent you will be liable. So consumer class can go there. It means if we, since the beginning we had already delivered this kind of power to the professional abilities, and they can make us trustmark to certifying something, even the laws and regulation not on there yet. But it will take as a best practices or good practices. So it means they can work even though the global consensus could not come. Yeah, in practice that is in civil liability. But it would be worse if criminal provisions, because maybe the prosecutors or the national security, in the name of the national security, law enforcement agency should have an umbrella to make a good tracing about the data. I propose that if we can make a difference, which kind of data can make what you call free flow, because in this context it's raw materials. It's like global common properties, global common good. But if the personal data, maybe it is impossible. So classifying as the data, and we can find there is which part of the data can go freely. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. I think we actually have time for one more question or comment. We have two, actually. If they're not too long, let's try to accommodate both of them.
Maggie Sadowska, the Council for Relations, sponsored by Hitachi. Thank you very much, excellent panel. And this is a question to you guys as well as anyone in the audience who wants to take that. Given everything that you have discussed today, yesterday, privacy, different laws for cybersecurity, what can and perhaps should the industry do to facilitate interoperability between different cloud services? Thank you.
Who would like to take that?
So, well, this is interoperability issue. Then, probably very much for the technology, I believe, and then it's really when the system was, I briefly mentioned about the data format, the transparency of the data format. It's a convertible way of data, and then also from the beginning of the introduction of the cloud system, then vendor locking should be prohibited. So these are all from the consumers, users' point of view. So that when the user is retrieving the data back from the vendor, service vendor, and then they're going to the another service provider, then it has to be protected. So safely, of course. So in order to do that, then the data format standard, at least on the user side, and then it can be kind of encrypted inside the cloud. But once it is safely decrypted back to the users, then it has to be convertible to any other cloud vendor. So that's one of the criteria. So that is a tremendous amount of efforts in the industry going on with to protect the users for vendor lock-in, and probably that's basically the requirement for the industry.
There is some working group talking about the interoperability since the 31st January, Jakarta, APEC working group. But I myself assume that if we talk about the interoperability, we talk about the willingness of the industry, to what extent they can share interfaces, some interfaces connection between the vendors. Otherwise, maybe it makes barriers. I remember the case of DocX after the Microsoft 2000s. In the practice, our society have open document format, ODF, and then they can solve each other once one of the vendor do not reluctant to share about the interface for the documents in order to have interoperability. Thank you.
And I would just note, briefly, from a vendor perspective, the power of the consumer is incredibly strong here, and where customers demand the use of a common data format, interfaces perhaps between different cloud systems, the vendors will follow. I think it's just by necessity to be really serving the needs of the community. So you have the privilege of the last question or comment.
Thank you very much for that very interesting argument. My name is Koshikata, professor of Keio University, but I was a director of the cybercrime of National Police Agency until last year. And my question related to the comment of the Professor Park. Professor Park developed that how to identify agreeable process about the privacy policy or multi-stakeholder model versus public sector. I think that depends on how we protect privacy. For example, if you choose the total or total liability, the multi-stakeholder model may work well, because as you know, the total liability can be decided by the commercial agreement. Total liability may work well for the business people or the usual users or the providers. But however, the total liability may not work well to the criminals or the terrorists. So and then if you choose the penal code, penal punishment, we need inevitably the process of the public sector, because the penal code must be decided by the diet of each country.